Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Here we are. This is our 100 and I don't know, 118th jam, something like that. We did lose count a while back. We had our 100th jam way back so many months ago. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So for the last since July 2012, we've been running this thing. It was originally called Preston Raspberry Jam, and then it was just called Raspberry Jam, and now we call it our Jam. And we started in July 2012, and we haven't really stopped. Some months we've run a few more than one. But since about April 2020, we've been running them all online. And as we have, more people come and join us every month, which is lovely. So thank you all for joining us with our Jam every month. Last few months, we've had a little bit of a change and a departure of how things normally. We held our first physical event in August, so we gave it a different name. We called it Preston Makefest, or Makeprest for short. And I'll be honest, it was a huge amount of fun. We got to meet people that we didn't normally get to meet, and some that we normally do. It was a bit of a challenge because, again, you know, lots of people will say we're not clear of COVID yet. It's not done with us. And it caused us just a few issues in terms of venue changes and people saying they would come and then they couldn't come and all that kind of thing. So it's probably going to be springtime before we have another physical event, which is great news, I suppose, for you people who only join us for the online jams. It's good. It's good because we're going to be planning more of these, which I'll come on to in a moment. And you know, so keep coming. I think the plan is we get to springtime and we will start to explore holding physical events. But even then, I think we're going for a hybrid sort of program where we will have a mix of online. And I've got a few things to maybe, if I have a few moments, I might show with you. So some of you use social media, some of you stay well clear of it, but I did post a video. I think it was just on Twitter earlier in the week. So on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day I was just able to get enough fuel to drive to Todmorden. I went there to pick up some dead tech, which I'll come on to in a moment. And while I was there, I was visiting the Makery in Todmorden, which is this fantastic make space. And wherever you live, you've probably got some other make spaces yourself like that. You know, they're all around the country now, and they're kind of spreading. And at the make space in Todmorden, or the Makery as they call it, they're looking to put on regular digital maker events. So one of the things we were talking about is how they might do that and how they might join up with our jam every few months or so. Now, there is something I'd like to think about for a moment. So we do have a chat. You can join in the chat. You can post things in the chat, and I need to go and have a look at those in just a moment. But I have some questions for you to ponder. Now, you might not answer straight away in the chat, but you might come in. So next month, the jam is all about dead tech. You may have heard of ed tech, these shiny new devices you can buy that they say is going to transform education. But there's also this thing that I refer to as dead tech. So I'll put a D in front of it, which is the things that are maybe dilapidated or dusty, might be sitting in a cupboard somewhere. Maybe somebody's donated them. In fact, I have some dead tech here on the table in front of me. And these were some laptops that were donated. Sometimes they're dated or they've been decommissioned. And you may already have access to some of these. You might know in some of your friends and families' houses, there's some dead tech lying around. So what's the question, Alan? Well, the question is, are there any of those that you've repaired? Have you turned into like a digital Dr. Frankenstein and you've managed to resurrect and bring these previously dead devices back to life? Have you been able to give them some kind of new purpose, restore them to their former glory? So think back and reflect. If you've ever done something like that, we'd love to know, because on the 1st of November, when we have our next online jam, the theme is dead tech. And we want you to come along and show us maybe photos of something or tell us about something. And I do have some examples that I might show or share a little bit later on. So At some point this evening, if you register for tickets for this jam, you'll probably get a notification. I don't know if you sign up to our Eventbrite notification, but you'll get a notification that you can book tickets for next month. Otherwise, you have to wait for a few days for me to get around and send them to you. Now, this evening's event, we have 3 lightning talks lined up. We will start with the first one in just a moment. So we have Scott, and Scott is going to be talking to us. Well, you'd have to read the program, I suppose. Let It Glow. That might sound a little bit like a song that is a bit of an earworm you've heard a few times. Then we have Paul. So the theme tonight is shed light, as in sometimes people say, oh, shed light on something, meaning to make something clear, but it can also mean to make something bright. And I think Paul, Dr. Footleg, has interpreted it as something to do with a shed. So he's going to be telling us about his automated chicken shed. And the other thing that we're going to have this evening as well, a lightning talk, that is light bulbs. And Garry told me, don't change it, Alan. It's not light bulbs, it's light bulbs. So we will get to hear about those very shortly. And then a special guest tonight, we've got Lorraine Underwood. You may have heard or seen her book, Save the World with Code. Well, we're going to be chatting with her. And I was chatting to Lorraine a little bit earlier, and she was showing me some of the things in her house you may have heard of. Well, will they all work? That is the question that we're wondering about. And will they light up? Well, we'll see. So our first lightning talk this evening is Scott. And I'm hoping that Scott now is there and Scott is able to say, here I am, Alan. Let me present. Great. So I've spotlighted you, Scott. You're Scott-lighted.
So, hi, everyone. So I'm here. This was actually when this topic came up. I was like, I've got just a project for it, because it was something I was wanting to build anyway, and I'll get on to why in a minute, but I'll just talk through. So we're coming up to Halloween. So Halloween, you need things to decorate your house, things that look cool when it's dark. So you need glow-in-the-dark stuff. The glow-in-the-dark is one of my favorite things. So I'm just going to share a screen. I've got a few slides to talk through. And then I'd just like to reference, though, the Let It Glow thing. So we're not doing the Frozen song. I mean, I've got a 5-year-old girl, so I know the Frozen song pretty well. But this is actually based around one of that. I'm going to talk about a bit about an album, and one of the songs in the album is called Let It Flow. So that's the reference. It's not Frozen, but Let It Glow, or why UV light, UV LEDs, and glow in the dark are best friends. So broadly, glow in the dark falls into 4 categories: bioluminescence, and that's all those weird things that live at the bottom of the sea. I love those nature documentaries when you get to those horrible jellyfish that live right at the bottom, and those horrific looking things that lie down there, but they glow. They're one of my favorite things to watch on the TV. Chemiluminescence, when you mix together chemicals, and that produces a glow in the dark effect. Phosphorescence, so this is what we're going to be concentrating on tonight. And the last one, which you don't want to go in here, which is radioluminescence. So a few years ago, we were considering moving house to a place across. I live right on the edge of the Forth River, and right across the Forth is this little place called Dalgety Bay. And Dalgety Bay has the most radioactive beach in the UK. They used to have a factory that produced glow-in-the-dark aircraft dials. Were produced in a factory just outside Dalgety Bay, and apparently some of this stuff is now getting washed up on the beach there. So most radioactive beach in Britain, Dalgety Bay. So phosphorescence, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. My first rule of purchasing, always choose glow in the dark. So quite often you'll be surprised, and when it comes up with an option, you know, you can get red or black or blue or glow in the dark. So always go for glow in the dark. And I said here, there's an amazing amount of materials that you can buy that glow in the dark, including but not limited to paint, thread, clay, knobs. You build guitar effects, you can get knobs that glow in the dark. I'll show you one of them in a minute. And rubber. So this plasti dip stuff is brilliant stuff if you're a maker and you need to do a project that involves water. Because what you can do is spray this stuff on and it'll give everything a coating. So it'll be water resistant and you can hide all the electronics and stuff in there. So I'll show you something that's been that use that plasti dip stuff, but that's great stuff if you can get a hold of it. And this is just this Fimo stuff. I did have some of this to display, but it got stolen by my daughter last night, so we don't have this. But I've got some thread and stuff, and I'll show that in a minute. So The phosphorescent stuff is pretty good. If you leave it out in the daylight, it'll charge up and it'll sort of glow gently at night. But if you want to kick it up a notch, ultraviolet LEDs. I'll show you these in a minute. So they're available at all your normal LED stockists. Not that great for what you'd normally use an LED for indicators or stuff like that. They're absolutely brilliant for bringing glow in the dark stuff to life. Now, you need to be a little bit more careful with these than with normal LEDs. Just avoid staring at them, avoid sticking them on your skin and stuff like that. But at the levels we're doing stuff on, battery, 3-volt kind of stuff, you don't have to be too careful with them. But just be aware, don't sit with them on your eyes like that, as if anyone would. Now, one of the reasons I like glow in the dark so much, and I'm going to get onto this in a minute as well, is the band Spiritualized. Now, Spiritualized are a band that were formed out the ashes of the Spectrum 3. They released 3 of my favorite albums in the world in the 90s, one of which we're going to come on to. I've seen them play live loads of times over the years. Big fans of Space, as you can see from that photo, and big fans of glow in the dark. So I'm actually going to take a break for a minute and switch the light off because we're going to do some display of the phosphorescent stuff. So let me just stop the share. Talk amongst yourselves. So what we've got now is I've got a little UV LED set up here. Well, we've all gone a bit dark. And what I can show you is, if I pull some of this stuff up. Now this is Spiritualized album. Now when this was brought out, let's just knuckle it about a little bit so you can see it in the dark there. So when this was brought out in 1997, the American copy, so this is the American copy, came on this fantastic glow in the dark plastic. And this is what you can do with a UV LED. You can just create little patterns on your glow in the dark stuff, and it glows up quite nicely. So this was one of my first cool things that I've owned that was glow in the dark. But since then, as I was saying, you can get loads of stuff. So here we go, a little guitar knob for an effect pedal. That's a nice little effect if you have a UV LED on your guitar pedal, or if you put it on a synthesizer, as I like to do. Pretty cool. Here's some thread. Just get a thread and sprinkle a little bit of the UV on it. So there we go, that nicely glows in the dark. Pretty cool stuff as well. What's kind of disappointing is if you put the buttons on your shirt with it, it doesn't really light up as much as you'd hope it would. I'd be pretty disappointed with that. So I thought, I'll get glow in the dark thread and then I'll put all the buttons on my shirts on. I was like dying for a button to fall off my shirt. And then it did, and it was kind of like, oh, I can't really see it, apart from a lot. And this is called E.T.'s Finger. This was done for a project that I displayed at a maker fair. And this actually goes in, it's got a little accelerometer in the middle, and this goes in a jelly mold. So this was in a rabbit LED, but because you're putting in jelly, you have to put it in when it's wet and wait for the jelly to dry. And normally wet stuff in electronics is a nightmare. But stick it in the plastic dip and it seals it all up and you're all good. But this one in particular is glow in the dark. So, always buy glow in the dark. Yeah, so Spiritualized released this thing and it had this brilliant glow in the dark cover. And like that was one of the coolest things. And this year they've decided to release their first 4 albums again, of which Pure Phase is one of them. So what they decided to do it on was an amazing piece of glow in the dark vinyl. Now, that is, I think I've always liked picture discs that come out in vinyl. So for the younger members of the audience, this is what you used to listen to music on. And some people still do and think it's the best thing. But they've released this record on glow in the dark vinyl, which I couldn't believe they'd done that. But the first thing I thought was, right, well, how can we combine that with electronics and get that doing something cool? So what I thought we could do, started. I'm going to put it on quietly so that we don't hear it flow. We don't get snaffled by YouTube. But then one of the things you can do is knock this up with a servo. And while you're listening to this is going to be challenging. Let's get it from the picture. So you can use a little servo on here to create motion, to create picture on your record while you're listening to it. So you can get a little light show going on your record as you go. So yeah, this is it. This is UV LEDs. So I'm getting a bit wobbly here because I'm getting too excited. But yeah, little UV patterns that you can do on a record as you're listening to it play. Which, if you ask me, it's pretty cool. So yeah, it's coming up for
Can I
Halloween.
ask, Scott, how many hours have you already spent watching this light show in your house?
I don't think I should be discussing that. It's a lot. But as soon as the record came out, I was like, I know what I'm doing. So I've got completely dark.
Would you say the effect is mesmerizing?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I don't know why this is working. I've got this connected up to a microbit, so it should just kick off, but we're not having fun at the moment. But you get the idea anyway.
Yeah. That's lovely. So we managed to do that without referencing any Disney musicals featuring cold frozen water. Oh, I said the name of it. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I mean, I can do that. I can get the guitar and do that, you know.
No.
I have to do these things.
That's one earworm we can do without tonight.
Yeah, this is a much better one.
So Scott, thank you very much for joining us. Do you know if you'll be hanging around for our jam jar later on?
Yes, I will. I will definitely.
So no doubt some people might have missed one or two details there. And for people who are joining us for the first time tonight, you might not know the jam jar is where we open up our breakout rooms and people go into the rooms and they can chat to each other informally. We don't record it. We don't stream it live. It's just a chance to have a jam jar, as in a drink of water, of course, with somebody that you would like to ask some questions. Thank you. And for our next lightning talk, we're going to Dr. Footleg, who is going to be presenting a project to us, Automatic Chicken Shed.
Good evening.
Good evening, Paul, or Dr. Footleg. Do you ever explain a little bit about the choice? Footleg, does it have any references to chicken or technology?
It's a good question. So when I was applying to universities, I got a letter where they'd misheard my surname. I'm actually Paul Fretwell in real life. And I got a letter addressed to Mr. Footleg. and I thought this was just really quite bizarre. And I was telling this anecdote when I first started in the University Caving Club, where there were 7 people called Steve and 5 people called Paul in a club of about 30 active members. And so all the Steves and all the Pauls, of course, had nicknames, and they started calling me Footleg. And that was in late 1980s, should we say. And everywhere I've gone since, there's always been another Paul. My first job, I started on the same day as one other guy who was called Paul. And just recently, my boss was called Paul, and one of my fellow people in the team under him was also called Paul. And we would quite often have meetings where there were just 3 Pauls in the room. And so being known as Footleg has always been convenient for distinguishing myself from all the other Pauls that seem to follow me around.
There's going to be lots of chattering later on social media tonight. Everyone going, gosh, now I know why Paul's called Footleg, you know. So are you going to tell us about your chicken shed? You're going to show us some images?
Let me share my screen. And
keeping chickens sounds like a lot of hard work, but if you can get computers to do some of that for you, then...
Right, can you see one of my chickens? Yeah. So we'd wanted to keep chickens for a long time, and so naturally I used my making skills to turn it into a project, and I designed a chicken hutch in SolidWorks CAD, and then started about learning how to do some woodwork. And you can see the finished thing in the background behind the chicken here. So this was my creation, and I thought it's kind of technically it's a small shed really. It's a shed for chickens. It's like a shed light. And so when I saw the theme was shed light, I immediately thought, oh, perfect! I can talk about the chicken hutch. Then I saw the other speakers and realised that everyone else was talking about LEDs, and that the penny dropped that maybe I'd slightly misinterpreted the theme. But you're getting the chicken shed tonight, so. Here's the flock now moved in. It's built with pretty heavy duty mesh because we do get foxes in the garden. And so to stop them digging their way in, we've got mesh buried in the ground as well as mesh on the run. And you can't photograph the chickens without getting photobombed. So this one particularly amused me as they stuck their head up in front of the camera and got in the way. And then we've got some smaller banty hens as well. So you can see the ramp there up into their kind of the shed part of their home. And we've got a vertically sliding door. You can see, hopefully it's attached by a piece of string and basically operates like this. So a little bit guillotine-like, and clearly we don't want to destroy the chickens. So I thought what we want is a way of opening and closing the chicken shed door without having to go up to the chicken shed, because it's kind of not too bad at this time of year. The chickens kind of are getting up and wanting to get out as it gets light, and that's about the time we're getting up. But in the summer, they're going to be wanting to get up and out at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And our cockerel can't wake up the neighbours properly if he's trapped in his shed. He wants to exercise his vocal cords outside. So we want the door to be automated. And that is how I got onto the chicken automation project. So I designed a circuit. It may look a bit complicated here, but actually there's only about 5 components. There's a WeMOS D1 mini board, which is an ESP8266 Wi-Fi enabled microcontroller. So think Arduino, but it's not an Arduino, it's a Wi-Fi enabled ESP chip. There's a motor driver, and this is a dual motor driver board, quite commonly used in robotics. It's a very cheap and cheerful one. And I discovered that you can run a stepper motor off a pair of motor driver outputs. So the 4 wires of the stepper motor are wired up to the motor driver, and that gives me control of the motor. For people who haven't used a stepper motor before, it's like a motor where you can programmatically turn it fractions of a turn. So you can say do like 1/8 of a rotation anti-clockwise, or turn kind of 20 times clockwise. So you can control it in code precisely, and that would be perfect for hauling the door up by winding up the string and unwinding it. I wanted to make this simple. It was only going to be a one-off, so I didn't want to build a PCB. So I instead went for strip board, and I used KiCad to actually lay out the strip board, and it proved to be a really nice technique. So I basically drew the green tracks are the equivalent of the copper on the strip board, and then my wire links are the kind of red, where I use the top layer in KiCad and the components, and I did a little bit of kind of fiddling to where a component actually bridges across, so the resistor actually goes 1 track further than its width. And so I've kind of jigged the track around it just to stop KiCad thinking there's a short there. But it enabled me to plan the layout, do all my wiring, and build my circuit. So I'm going to stop the screen share so that I can show you the actual component in action. Can you now see me back on the camera? Because I can't see myself. I'm hoping that if you can't see me on the camera, someone will shout. So here's the circuit. So I've got a stepper motor. I 3D printed a pulley, and there's a plate also to bolt onto the motor to attach it all. And so I can control with code how many rotations this does, and it will wind up the string. So quite simple mechanical piece. The motor driver, which is just one of the really cheap and cheerful ones, and then the rest of the circuit on the strip board. Now, there's a few power considerations here. The stepper motor needs 6 volts to power it. The D1 board, which is soldered onto this is the kind of Wi-Fi enabled microcontroller, that has a 5 volt input, and it drops that down to 3.3 volts. You can power it directly off 3.3 if you want, but because this board that I used had a 5 volt input, I thought all I've got to do is I need 6 volts for the stepper motor and the motor driver, but 5 volts for the electronics. And let me jump back to the screen share. So if a 6 volts coming in and I need 5 volts, I could put a voltage regulator on there. But there's actually a really cheap trick you can use here, because you may know that when you put a diode in a circuit, it has a voltage drop, and it's typically in the region of about 0.7 of a volt. So my 6 volts going through a diode drops down to about 5.3 volts. Actually, I've measured it, and this particular diode drops it nicely down to about 5.1. So well within the tolerance of this board, which will cope with up to about 5.5 volts. So 6 volts would damage it, but just by putting the diode in there, it drops the voltage with a cheap as chips component. And it also gives me polarity protection. So if I ever accidentally connect things up the wrong way, the diode will stop the electricity running the wrong way through the board and damaging it. So 2 for the price of 1 feature there. And then the rest of this circuit is I've got a photoresistor which senses light and changes its resistance based on the light levels. That enables me to measure how light it is, so that I can, in my code, say when the chicken hutch is when it gets dark enough, it's time to close the door. And then I've got a couple of temperature sensors on there, because I also want to know, I wanted an outdoor monitor. Back in April, you probably saw me talk about my greenhouse temperature sensors I was building. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have sensors out in the chicken hutch, I may as well measure the outdoor temperature there, and that can be my outdoor temperature. And then if you're going to have an outdoor temperature sensor, why not also have one inside the hutch to find out how cold they get at night? So there's a connector as well for one that's on a long bit of wire. So I can read the temperature from 2 different sensors, and I'll know what the outdoor temperature is, and I'll know what the indoor temperature is for the chickens. How do I get all this data? Well, it's a Wi-Fi enabled board. So it will send the data back to the house. And I'm not going to go through the code in great depth, but it also occurred to me that I need to know what time it is, so that I don't want the chicken hutch door to close if it just gets dark because a thundercloud's come over, and kind of shut the chickens out when they want to run in if it's raining. So I want to know what time of day it is. And it turns out that it's really easy to get the time over Wi-Fi. And I'm just calling a library, which I imported, where I just call get network time. And the time now on the chip is essentially is date and time, and it's sometime back in 1970 if the chip has just been booted up. And so if the clock is basically reading a time that's way back in the distant past, I know it's not got the real time, and so I'll go and get it from the network. And then once it's got the time from the network, I now can tell that I've connected to Wi-Fi, and it can send me MQTT messages to let me know how light it is, what temperature it is inside and outside the chicken hutch, whether the door's open or closed, and it can control the door. So it's all ready to be fitted. The only problem I've got to solve now is running power all the way up to the chicken hutch. And that's where I'm at.
Paul, just a couple of questions before we go to our next talk, if that's
Yes.
okay. Do you ever sense or wonder that there's a danger you're maybe over engineering some of these projects when you could simply just open and close the door? Do you think?
Yeah, so here's the interesting first test. I was worried about not getting this installed in time for when the chickens went in, but I figured that actually we needed to kind of get the chickens used to going into the shed at night. And the first night, none of the chickens went into the shed. They all just kind of perched up on their enclosure. And so we went out and kind of posted them all in and closed the door. We're about 2 weeks in now to them being in their new home. And there's 2 that stubbornly perch up outside every night and don't go in. The others have learned that it's the warm, cozy place to be. And the place that they perch inside their hutch isn't actually under the roof line. So when it's raining, we find them just bedraggled on this perch, sat in the dark, waiting for us to come and remind them that actually there's a dry indoor bit. So the technology at the moment is not really going to be useful for closing the hutch at night, because we need to actually check they're all in before we close it. And they haven't yet reliably learned to go in. But in the morning, they absolutely want to come out at first light. And I absolutely don't want to be getting up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in the summer to go and open their hutch. So
isn't there a Python library that somebody's developed as well for chicken facial detection? So you could get it to scan so it would know which chicken is, or have I just made that up?
So there's definitely machine learning models for face recognition, and I'm pretty sure someone will have trained one on chickens, because it's the kind of thing that makers do. So that's definitely a possibility, but having cameras covering all possible places that the chickens might be outside of the, or even inside, that's maybe going to be a challenge. That chickens are a great test subject because they confound all expectations by doing eccentric things, and they're very entertaining creatures with a lot of personality.
You might have detected a sort of tongue-in-cheek element to my questions. I'm saying that before I ask you the final one. So I've had some friends and relatives who have maintained chickens, and I've always kind of fancied it myself, but they always say, oh, the cleaning up is just such a messy job. Would you not have been better off designing a piece of technology to clear up after the chickens rather than something that came a little bit more easily opening and closing doors?
So the excuse me, I'm trying to mute the phone, but it's not having any of it.
I'll get the phone right now. We're probably stroking the cats. So leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Right, so it's fine if we captured a little bit of Footleg's voice greeting message there. So I think Paul is probably going to come on the chat later on, and he's going to say, actually, Alan, I am working on a project at the moment that is something to deal with. And I think the nice word to use is guana when we're talking about waste product from
Sorry about that, Alan.
Dory.
Yeah.
Dory.
So
Well, people know we're live.
Quick answer. We designed the chicken hutch to that the entire floor is removable. So it's basically like two giant trays. So you can just pull them out, empty out all of the straw, which is what we put in there to catch most of the chicken manure, shall we say, and you can hose it down. And the actual real problem you need to deal with chickens is they can get chicken mite, and once they get them, they just make them really itchy. You can dust the chickens down to try and keep it under control, but the mites will hide in every possible nook and cranny of a chicken hutch. So we've made it so that we can hose the thing down, and because you can take the floor out. If we've taken the floor out, we can hose it down, and all the water can just pour out the bottom, and then we can put the drawers back in. So it's been made easy clean and easy access. That's the beauty of designing and building your own chicken hutch.
I think somebody was imagining that it was the chicken shed was ringing you on your phone to say one of the chickens is outside and refusing to come in. Paul, another brilliant project, and thank you so much for sharing it. And you remind me that one of the great things since we moved our jam online, it's helped bring people together from all across the country and beyond. And I'm looking at you, Catherine, over in Belgium as well at the moment. So thank you, Paul. We're going to go now to our final lightning talk before we go and meet our special guest this evening. So Paul, if you're able to close the screen share, and then Garry, I'm sure it will be with us very shortly.
Hopefully I already am.
You already are, yes.
Okay, ready to go?
Yeah, and I'm just going to spotlight you. Okay.
Right, well, welcome everybody to the latest instalment of my robot project. Things seem to have been going on forever. I was actually really pleased this month when Alan said that he was going to have a light-based theme, because with my previous incarnations of the robots, one of the things that's kind of niggle at me really, I suppose, is the fact that the robot's face has been relatively impassive. And you can't really kind of tell very much about the robot's inner feelings about what's going on. And the first version of the robot, in fact, I used this mannequin head here, which is made out of polystyrene. And the idea of putting that on the robot was to give it some kind of personality to give some impression of the thing being a humanoid. In the version that I recreated in the summer, which is the one that you can see here, and for any of you who managed to come along to our exhibition at the Harris Library, you'll have seen the thing on display. I decided to completely rebuild it from the ground up, and in particular, I spent quite a long time thinking about what kind of head and what kind of face I wanted to have on this robot. And what I opted for in the end, as you can see, is this kind of cartoon-like face based on, I suppose, manga type cartoon drawings. So it's got a pleasant look to it, it looks friendly and so on. But it can't be changed very easily because these are all 3D printed parts and the thing is fixed in terms of how it looks. However, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a new sci-fi film, I think it's on Netflix, called Space Sweepers. And on Space Sweepers, they have a robot called Bubs. And in fact, I'll show you a picture of Bubs so you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. So let's do... Okay, so you should see my screen now, and you should be able to see Bubs. There's Bubs. And you can see this particular character has got a number of different expressions on its face. So its eyes can light up or they can be switched off. It can do a big cheesy grin like this, and it can even blush. You can see there's little pink marks on its cheeks there. So I thought, well, this actually is quite a good idea. We're using light here in a relatively simple way. It's still a kind of cartoonish look to it. And that gives you the ability to be able to give the robot some kind of emotion. It's not the first time that something like this has been done. In fact, there was a film called Moon, which was on, again, thinking that's on Netflix. And on Moon, there's a robot stroke computer called Garry. And Garry, it can talk, but also it has this little screen on there where it shows these emoticons to give some idea of its inner state. And so again, this idea of using a cartoon face seems to me to be quite a good way of communicating between robots and human beings. You don't have to have something which is completely human-like, as long as you can get the basics across. So I took the idea from Bubs, and I've now created this head, which is an alternative to the one that's on there at the moment. I've 3D printed that. If I just go back to stopping the share so we can get to see it better. So with this head, what I've done is I've tried to get some of the characteristics of the Bubs head built into this. And what I did was I took the basic shell, which is 3D printed, and I printed it off as a hollow shell, which you can see here. But you can see it's got a double skin to it. So between those two layers of the skin, I put an LED array, and this is a flexible array. Got this one relatively cheaply off the internet. It was 2 for £28, and basically you can fold that or roll that up like that, and then you can slot it inside the space between the two layers of plastic. And because the plastic's only 1 millimeter thick, then the LEDs shine through quite nicely, and you can then create your own Bubs type robot. So I switch it on. You can see there its eyes are glowing yellow, but also I can change it so that they're blue here with a cheeky little smile. There's my equivalent of Bubs's blush, with pink cheeks and blue eyes. And there's a big cheesy grin and some devilishly red eyes. So by using this array, you can obviously program any color that you want on it, and you can also program it to produce all these various shapes. So the idea now is that I can take that head and I can mount it on this body or another body if I want to, and I'll have my own robot that's able to communicate with us, not just through voice and through gesture, but also through facial expressions as well.
So at a previous jam, we had an incarnation of your robot that played guitar. Does that mean we can have vocals
Yes.
as well as a guitarist.
Well, yes. In fact, on a much earlier version of the robot, I did actually have vocals, and it would also respond as well to you talking to it. But I've just not actually used that recently on the later versions because I've been focusing more on the kind of physical side of the robot and trying to get the mechanics and things right. But yes, absolutely. Ultimately, I'll bring all of these things together, and we'll have a fully working robot. So. Just as I say pretty much every month, watch this space.
I'm wondering how many jams we're going to have to get to before we say, Garry, you can start, and we won't know which is you and which is the robot.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably unlikely to happen in our lifetimes because obviously, the kind of level of detail and subtlety and so on that you have to put into it in order to produce something which was truly human-like is way beyond. But let's be honest, it's way beyond even any technology that we've got at the moment. Even if you were a billionaire, you probably wouldn't be able to produce anything that had that kind of level of detail to it. The kind of Westworld type thing, if any of you have seen that. So for me, it's what is more important is getting the essence of this across and focusing on the important things. And if you're going to build some kind of human-robot relationship, then you need to look at ways of communicating with robots that is meaningful to the human being, but doesn't have to be utterly convincing. And we actually work really well at being able to do this sort of thing. And if we send text messages to each other, and we put emoticons on there, we're able to communicate something of our emotional state to the other person. So why not stick with what we know works, and which is relatively simple to put into action, so that you can have something up and running and working, rather than striving for something which we're probably never going to get to, or at least not for a very long time. And the other thing it does, of course, as well, is it avoids the trap of the uncanny valley, as they call it. The uncanny valley is this idea that humans can relate well to things that look exactly like themselves, behave exactly like themselves. So we've got a high level of empathy with other people, for instance. We also have quite a high level of empathy with things which are cartoonish. So teddy bears and non-creepy dolls, again, we can relate to really well. But things which horrify us, which are things like things which look like dead people, for example, not a great kind of relationship. They're low down in terms of empathy, and so they're down in what they call this uncanny valley. And the trick when you're creating robots of this sort is to create something which doesn't creep people out. Now, this used to creep people out to some extent, which I always found quite amusing. But you do kind of get used to it after a while. But this is never really going to creep you out. It's too cartoonish. Same with this as well. So you can empathise with it, and you can kind of build some sort of relationship with it in terms of how you interact with it much more comfortably than you can, say, with something which is like this. Or ventriloquist dolls. I mean, that's another example of something which is mechanical but really quite creepy. So yes, that is my quest, to find something we can feel friendly towards, and we feel is friendly towards us.
That's great. Garry, you join us every single month pretty much, and there's always some fantastic development. And as I watch you present, I'm thinking, oh, I want. So we may chat in the jam jar later on. Will you be around for the jam jar?
I could be around for about 10 minutes or so, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we might have to catch up after then. But again, I've just mentioned the jam jar earlier, trying to encourage people. That's where you can come in and join us in these breakout rooms in Zoom. It's not recorded, it doesn't go out in the live stream, but you can, so if you get in there quick after we've finished our discussion with Lorraine, you can ask Garry some questions and I will find him another time. Thank you very much for joining us yet again.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see how you're going to make next month's theme, Dead Tech, fit in.
Well, yeah, I was actually clearing out my garage recently, and I
threw getting rid of some old robots.
Yeah, well, not robots, but certainly other computer tech. So actually, I've got very little left. So I'm not. I'll have to have a look around and see if there's anything I can contribute to next month, but I can't guarantee it at the moment, I'm afraid.
perhaps there's some motor manufacturer near us getting rid of those, you know, those robot arms that they used to use to assemble,
yes.
or who knows?
Well, you can actually buy those secondhand on the internet. You know, full-size industrial robot arms.
Okay.
I did toy with the idea for a while, but I thought that, you know, my wife would probably call a limit on that one.
Right.
All right.
Jam jar discussion later on. Thank you, Garry.
Okay.
Okay, now before our next guest joins us, there is something that I wanted to mention, which is we have each month, we have experimented and tried different suggestions that would, you know, people fill in. We have these feedback forms at the end of an event. You can always fill the feedback form in. There's a link, something like exit is our jam feedback. Yes, in fact, that's what it is. And in our feedback forms, it was suggested that we have celebrity guests, or when we use the word celebrity, I mean, our next guest probably doesn't want to be called as a celebrity, but when we have our guests along, they're people that we know and we've heard, just like Garry and Paul and Scott with their projects. So we're asking, Lorraine, are you there? Can you hear us, Lorraine?
Hello.
Hello. Oh, oh, there you are. Okay. So Lorraine, where are you joining us from in the world tonight? Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm joining you from my hallway.
Okay.
In North Yorkshire in the UK. So
it's not a million miles from Preston. It's probably, would be about an hour drive or so north.
Yeah, just about. When I used to come to the live face to face, it was just an hour. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Now, I've heard some people refer to you as the queen of NeoPixels or the illuminated wizardry person. Have you had other nicknames and titles attributed to you like those?
None that I can say.
No. And then there's Lorraine Bow. That one comes up quite a lot as well. So I was wondering if, as our first topics, if you could just if you can, in 100 words or less, I would struggle myself. How did you get from where you were to here, people recognizing you as somebody who is a genius with LEDs and NeoPixels? Tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, you didn't grow up here in England, did you?
No, sorry, my son is sneaking in. Are you coming in or not? No. No, I'm from Ireland originally, and I did a degree in computer science. So I do have a CS background, but it was just all software. I had no kind of hardware course part like to my degree. And I didn't, by the end, I was kind of done with. I didn't want to do programming. I was a scout leader. I was much more interested in like kind of the youth development and teaching. So but in Ireland at the time, you couldn't teach computing or even IT explicitly in schools in Ireland. So I saw that they were giving away free money in England, Wales actually. And I came over and did my postgraduate certificate in education, which is a teacher training qualification in Wales. And then I kind of never left the United Kingdom since then. And that was 15 years ago. And again, like I was just teaching IT at the time, and I wasn't really interested in hardware. I was still doing programming and things. And it was when I joined Lancaster University. So I lived in New York for a while, and then I flipped to the other side of the rows to go to Lancaster University, and I joined Pi Academy. So Raspberry Pi had these courses for educators, and I sneaked onto one because I was a computing at school regional coordinator. So I was teaching teachers how to teach computing. And that's it. That was the switch that flipped me onto making and digital making when I coded a light to come on using some Python code, which I barely knew. This was about 6-7 years ago that I did this. And that was my switch. That was my, and then I think a week later, I discovered RGB LEDs that I've never turned back from there.
So some people refer to that first LED, switching LED on with Python. Some call that a physical computing version of Hello World.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
Hello World is for those who aren't in the know, it's supposed to be one of your, if you're going to write some code, hello world is kind of like, yeah, I made something appear, some words appear on the screen. And a lot of younger people particularly go, why do you even want it to say hello world? But the LED, that was one of your first things that memory is stuck there. And then you discovered RGB LEDs, which are in a sense, great big versions of the things that we have in our laptops and screens and phones and TVs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can display any kind of color that you want.
Yeah, you can use codes to display any color you want. If you get you can get ones that you can individually control, so you can the lights in it, so you can make the first light red, second light green, and that's where I kind of moved on from. And my first project is actually here. This is why I'm sitting in the hallway. If you want to have a look.
You've not been naughty. That's not
No,
why you're
not
sitting
the
there.
naughty stuff. That is the naughty stuff over there. That's pretty close.
So I told some people, Lorraine's coming next month, and they said, I do hope she's going to start in the hallway. So you've made some people very happy by starting in the hallway.
So just turning off my lights. So
let me change the view.
My other son's coming in the back door. You might hear him come in now. So
whoa.
So these are 200. It's coded to 220, but it actually doesn't make it all the way up to the top. So I must have 230 lights here on the stairs. Go, David, go.
All in string. Yeah.
It's just my children arriving home.
I'm not David.
Okay, Sam, go away. Right now, this is just actually a test script. So this is my hello world. This is a rainbow. So this is what I use to test if my strips are working. So I put on just a strip that you can just about see it. They are moving. So the lights, they're moving up the stairs. They're very gently. You'll see that purple is heading up the stairs. I don't know if you can tell it on the computer.
It's
very subtle.
Yes, it is, and it's very gradual. But if to move to look away and look back in a few moments, then you would notice that they had changed. And of course, the lovely thing about an RGB LED is, as you said, it doesn't just necessarily display, a red crimson, especially a red value of 255, and everything else is. You can transition from one color into another as you go through the rainbow or the color spectrum.
Yeah, really nicely, really subtly. And in the beginning, these stairs were kind of connected to a Raspberry Pi, so they were connected to the internet, and it was weather controlled. So it would check how cold it is outside, and if it was just 0 degrees, only these lights would come on and they would be white. And if it was 5 degrees, it would be these white and then blue. And when it was 26 degrees, which it doesn't get to very often in North Yorkshire, the whole rainbow would turn on.
So when people got excited about IoT and they were saying have an internet connected fridge, you were, we've an internet connected staircase. Yes.
Yeah, so I was doing stair lights. So my children were very young. They were 4 or 5. So they'd come out of their bedrooms and go, oh, it's white. I need my coat. And it was really cute. It was really nice kind of use of the stair lights. I really like using lights and technology for a purpose rather than just being an art display, which is quite a lot of the things that I do with lights. They're not just lights, they're either displaying information or they're interactive.
So that's really, and the other thing is, I think, if I'm right, you've been asked to write some articles and tutorials based on this particular project. Is in the Magpie magazine and the Hackspace? Is that?
I think this one is in Magpie. Yeah, I can tell you the issue number when we head downstairs because I've got it framed.
Very good.
It gives you the code and how to connect it all up and where to buy the parts as well. So yeah, I wrote it up.
The stripy carpet. Was that carpet already there when you moved in, or you thought, no, we've got to have a rainbow kind of striped carpet to show the?
Yeah, it was my idea.
And
it's not rainbow. It's not quite a full rainbow striped carpet, but it is a nice striped carpet. Yeah.
And the fact that the opposite wall is a fairly neutral color reflects it all quite nicely as well. Because that's when you really,
My house is very subtly a rainbow because that wall is blue and that wall is purple and this wall is green, and the landing upstairs is yellow. So if you follow the house up, it is a rainbow.
And if somebody else was to do a project like this, are we talking about hundreds of pounds or so?
Not at all. Like I think like right now, this is just a rainbow, and this is using a microbit to control it. The most expensive bit of this would be the charger, and that's like £20. You know, the power supply. And you might have it already in your house because it's kind of like a kettle power supply. It just needs to be 5 volts. So the power supply, a couple of wires, this light strip, you can get these quite cheap on eBay. I think these are like £20 again. So yeah, you're talking definitely under 50, definitely under 100, maybe even under 50
I imagine you must have thousands of these strips and LEDs and NeoPixels in your house.
Absolutely, yeah, over 1,000.
What are your
Yes.
electricity bills like then? They must be enormous.
We're doing okay. We kind of accept that this is a Victorian house and it's cold to heat, so we accept that the bills were always going to be high. It's difficult to heat, so I hide the electricity bills and the gas bills.
Okay. I suppose what you could do as well, you could have the colors of the stairs reflecting the amount of power consumption. So if
Yeah,
been...
oh, I would love to get LED panels, and not LED panels, sorry, solar panels.
Photovoltaic panels on the roof, so you
Yeah.
could have you could capture the sun in the daytime to
power the stairs and
power
everything
the
else.
stairs at nighttime. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere else in your house that you might be prepared to take us on an adventure? I'm wondering, are there more projects like this?
So this is a kind of coming project, and I've done this in the past. This is my front room. This is the front window. They're just actually, I'll show you the box downstairs. They're just a set of lights that you can buy off Amazon, but you can very easily hack them. So that's getting ready for Halloween. Then we have my family members, my messy house, and we come across this door in the kitchen. And my sister-in-law was very scared of this when she first saw it. It was like a dark room, stairs leading down.
It's not a priest hole, is it, for hiding priests?
That's the microbit that's connected to the stairs. So that's the power supply and the microbit and the wiring. So it goes right on. We're right under the stairs now.
Right, we're inside the box.
And we come to this magical place, which is quite messy, but is my basement. The lights are they don't flicker like this in real life. But I'll just try and show you around.
So is this place, is this space called Lorraine Underworld?
Oh, I haven't named it. It does need a cool name like that, Alan. It does.
Underworld. It's a bit of a mouthful.
It's a bit of a tongue twister. So we kind of got this done during lockdown last year. We were very lucky that it was planned. Just as lockdown started, they started drilling the floor. So it was a bit of a shell. This basement, it was a bit damp. And then we got the builders in. They did an amazing job. They lowered the floor. So my husband, 6'2", his head used to rub off the ceiling. But now the ceiling's higher because the floor is lower. And it's just been our space. My husband's a bit of a nerd as well. He does a lot of making. So it's been great over lockdown to have a space like this. We've got all our toys here. So that's our 3D printer. I do some vinyl. So we got a cry-cut vinyl cutter. We have a miller just there. This is kind of supposed to be a free bench. It's never free. Lots of that's a normal printer, lots of electronic parts, some posters. This is my baby.
Was that a GPIO layout for the Raspberry Pi? I just saw on the wall then.
Yeah, it's a...
Well, do you know,
Raspberry
whenever
Pi
I've
GPIO.
seen these, it might be because I'm of a certain age, but I've always found them really difficult to read. I might just come back and watch this video later on because there they all are.
It's just massive. It's just like we have the same problem that they're too small. It's a spider.
Do they all light up different colors as well?
They do if I ever plug it in. Yeah. So
okay.
There's a little LED there and there's a bit of acrylic there, so they glow.
Of course.
Each one of them glows, and obviously ground is green, so it's obvious. It's clear to see from a distance at least that these ones are the ground ones, and that's 5 volt. And it's got some labels. So that was vinyl cut labels.
And then just as we went past that, there's this 7-segment display with
This was a video I made for Element 14. So these are 3D printed panels with, I think, 3 LEDs, RGB LEDs in each section. And it's all one single strip, just arranged in a kind of clock.
Wow.
So the
And-
wiring is just going through the wood around the other side and out. So it looks really neat. The time isn't quite correct.
No. But projects like this, but they must take you hours and hours and hours to build them. You must,
Yeah,
do you not find that really like annoying how long they take?
No, this one was a really fun one because it was part of the basement build. You know, I felt like it's useful. You know, it's a clock. I needed a clock in this room. It lights up. I made it for Element 14, so they helped me purchase all the parts to it, and they put the video together in a really nice way. You know, they edited the video and it's up on their YouTube channel. So it's like a maker project that you get paid to do. That's like the dream. But it was also something that I wanted to do. You know, it was something I felt it completes because it matches the aesthetics of the basement. I felt it was mine rather than a project like being paid and it goes to someone else. You know, there's loads of spiders in here. I'm just
Well, we can't see them. It also, I'm just noticing you've got just some like boring white lights on the ceiling, of course, because I suppose you do need some practical lighting, like the lights above you.
Oh, these are fantastic, these panels.
Yeah.
So we didn't want like drop lights because you find they just create like shadows and circles of shadows in
Spiders like
different
them, though.
places.
Spiders like them because they can
spiders like them, yes.
draw webs between them.
They don't realize that this is not their home anymore.
No, and tall people like them because they don't keep banging into them. In our house, I keep walking into
Yeah.
our lights.
But it's not a very tall room. We have a projector here as well.
Ooh.
So my husband just about hits the projector if he's not paying attention.
So that's got thousands more LEDs inside it as well, hasn't it?
That's for the kids, really. That one was not for me. It was like part of the home cinema.
Ah, and then you've got
So
a screen to plug it down.
We pull out the sofa that's hidden under the stairs, and we have a little cinema night for the kids.
Ooh. And when you were apologizing before for having your desk being messy, sometimes when I see these people share photos and videos of their workshop and all the tabletops are clear, I think, does anybody actually ever make anything in these spaces? But this really does look like, what about them little plastic tub things on the wall? What are they over there? Do they come off? Are they like little storage bins?
Yeah, they're just little storage things. They've got like RGB breadboard LEDs.
Oh, of course, they would have LEDs in them, I suppose.
RGB shapes go in here. Tiny switches. So just like little components that I have. Small arcade buttons. I've got loads of these. These are great. I love these. So just a way of storing big arcade buttons.
Wow. Lots of people would like to go in there and play and start building projects with some of these things. There was one project you've not mentioned that you brought to our 75th jam in Preston, the Cube.
Oh yeah, Hubert, R.I.P.
You sound a bit sad when you, did something happen to Hubert? Did Hubert have an accident?
Hubert is in the loft, so I'm not going up 3 flights of stairs.
Not in this jam, maybe in a future. What's your head?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
This is the remains of Hubert. So Hubert was a 1 meter tall RGB LED cube. Oops.
So more LEDs, but ping pong balls and pieces of copper wire to carry signal data power to the LEDs. Yeah.
8 by 8 by 8, so 512 ping pong balls.
Lorraine, where on earth do you get all these ideas to build all these things?
Oh, Hubert was definitely a guy called Harry. If you go to my blog, I've referenced him. He built a cube. He coded it with Arduino, and I was like, I just want to build this cube. You know, I'm going to copy Harry. I didn't copy him exactly. You know, I took a lot of his ideas and his PCB design and just redeveloped it into my own idea. His is a solid cube. You know, it lives in his basement and he can't get it out. While mine, you can carry it places like Preston. So I did adapt it, you know. So I found a project that I really loved, I really wanted to do, but I adapted to what I needed it to be, what I wanted it to be. So that's where I get a lot of my inspiration. It's just from other makers, you know, what they do. But it's the adaptation that I love. You know, I love that Qbert could go places. I went to Dublin, you know, I went to Coder Dojo's big event, what they call it, Coolest Projects. And I showed it off there, and it really, kids love it. And it brought to Cambridge and Newcastle. Hey, I had a good life, Qbert. But these, after carrying around these spiky things in my arms for like 6-7 trips, it was each, if this light fails, the whole column is gone. And I ran out of spare columns, and eventually it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It wasn't an 8x8x8, it was an 8x8x6 cube. So eventually I had to retire Qbert up to the basement. It's still there. She's still lying in a heap in the loft, sorry. But
we've talked about a few of your projects. One that you've not mentioned yet is just a little while ago, we had a book published, or was it we? You had a book published, How to Save the World with Code. That
was a real dream of mine. So
weren't you saying earlier software didn't really do it for you? You were saying it was more about the physical building things that you were excited about?
It was when the publishers approached me, it was kind of, you know, what's going to sell books? People don't know what physical computing is. You know, it really is a physical computing book. You know, you need the devices to be able to take part in the projects, to build the projects yourself. But it was what would sell and what makes sense to people. And like, you do need code, you know, you don't, you can't, I wouldn't like to build a project and not code it. I think code is still, I still enjoy coding, and I still believe that people will enjoy coding once it's relative to them. You know, if you want to build a cube, but you want to create a star and the 3D star in the middle, coding that is really interesting and can be really exciting, especially like debugging it when you've got like a hexagon instead of a star. It can be really fun and interesting. But code alone is what I don't like, just code on a computer. So
there could be a book afterwards called Now We've Saved the World with Code. Now we can have some fun with LEDs and RGB, NeoPixels and these kind of things.
It is a fun book. Like it's separated into 3 sections of zombie apocalypse. You know, there's a zombie apocalypse, what are we going to do? Climate change, kind of like closing windows, turning off radiators because it's too hot, and protecting your own stuff. So protecting your home, protecting doors and windows from opening. So I did try and make it fun. And there are RGB LED projects in the book. There's a sword.
Oh, yes. Like a Minecraft sword.
Yeah. If you tilt it a certain way, it changes color. So I did try to keep it a fun book. Like I put kids on the cover to show that it's kid friendly. But it's, you know, I think we're missing a lot of language in computing of how to sound fun. I don't think we're quite there yet. When you say code, people think, yay, that sounds fun.
Something I was wondering you could elaborate on. So not many people have been to where you live. So I would describe it as a fairly rural place, as in there's a very small primary school, there's a post office not far down the road, and then there's lots of these windy roads where people drive too fast, and there's not many houses in between. This doesn't sound like the kind of place that we're going to go to some underworld kind of kingdom where there's 3D printers and all this kind of stuff. So if somebody's watching this and they're kind of getting a little bit of envy and they're getting a bit jealous, thinking, oh, Lorraine's got it all, she's got all this fab tech, is there any bits of advice, you know, and they're living somewhere very rural?
Yeah.
Would you have any suggestions or advice to them? Particularly if they're young and they don't have a car, maybe as well.
Well, I definitely didn't start with this. You know, this is I am living the dream. This is the dream, and I never thought I would have this kind of room to myself. You know, I thought maybe I'd go and visit someone else's room. And I didn't start with this. You know, 4 years ago, I was building that cube on the kitchen table, and LED belt that I brought to Preston Maker Fair, was it? What was it called? Makespace thingy. In
one of them Preston
in the
things,
school.
Yeah.
You know, I built that on the sitting room table. It didn't, and I was able to, because you don't need these huge tools to do those kind of things with the kind of really exciting things that are coming out these days of microbit and Raspberry Pi and NeoPixels. You know, the cost is lowering, the gates are lowering, you know, the kind of the walls, the barriers are coming down. It's becoming more and more accessible to people who are not electrical engineers, which I am not. Don't be fooled by any of this. I don't know what a resistor is. I don't know how to like make a PCB. The people you had on before me are way more skilled than me in electrical things. I'm a maker, and I can make things work together and into exciting creative things. And that's what I do.
And you also found ways to connect with others online.
Yeah, that's where I, like 5-6 years ago, when I joined Pi Academy, I just kind of joined Twitter as well. And it's a huge, really welcoming maker community on Twitter. You just have to follow like a few core accounts, get involved with the conversation, and just I kind of lurked for a while. I think a lot of people still lurk, but I started to share what I was doing and asking questions, and people were so happy and so helpful to answer them. In the very beginning, David Whale was telling me you need to ground your microbit when my lights wouldn't turn on, and that was so helpful, because it's not written anywhere. You know, it may be now, but in the beginning, you might find. And I didn't find a lot of answers to the new tech that was coming out, but there are more and more resources. The microbit website is great, are education based, but there's still good resources, quick, easy to understand videos on there.
There's another thing I've always really admired that you do when you use social media. I mean, like if I say the opposite, some people use social media and they just share, say, an image or something. It's like, look how perfect my life is, and I've got all this perfect stuff, and
no spiders.
and yeah, and everything all works perfectly all the time. But what you do is different. You say, oh, I've got this idea. I want to start building this cube thing. How big do you think it should be? Do you think it should have this? And I've seen this over weeks and over months, people chipping in saying, oh, add in this and make it this. And people feel like they're part of the project. And
it
it's
really
not
was
all about presenting some highly polished.
You're right. Yeah, Keyboard was
perfectly. Yeah,
Keyboard was a real labor of love, and people were following that, and they were emotionally attached to Keyboard. There was Black Friday where Keyboard almost died, and people were like, "Is Keyboard okay? Is Keyboard going to make it? Are we ever going to see Keyboard?" And it was great to share that. It's kind of, you do feel anxious about sharing your mistakes, and I did initially, but it just became comical at some point of like what was happening, what I was doing. And yeah, the more I shared, the more people helped and loved it and enjoyed it. And yeah, it was a great experience. And that's why, I try and do that in a lot of my projects, is share the failures as well as the successes.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that approach, because it means you're taking people along with you rather than I don't know if my project is worthy enough. I mean, like the other example, Garry, I said he comes every month, and every month we see an incremental, I mean, they're big increments, but we see a change from month to month. And you know, you've been a fantastic inspiration with so many people. We're looking forward to coming along tonight to hearing you talk about your projects. And it's been wonderful. I've never actually been to your house, but now I kind of feel like I have been in a way. Yeah,
you should come up for a cup of tea.
After I've dropped in at my friend's, I don't know if you saw recently, I just discovered yesterday that the UK government is going to open up a huge big central cybersecurity thing at Salisbury.
Yeah,
Salisbury, just across the river from here. So I might be busy for a while, dropping in on some other neighbours for tea before we come up. But no, honestly, Lorraine, everything you do is fantastic. People love seeing it, and I would encourage you, please carry on doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to have a few more bits of information to pass on to our people. If you're hanging around to listen to me for a few moments, there's something I want to share with you. I've got some photos. Let me just see if I can get the right browser on my screen. So many thanks there to Lorraine. I've had to it's great to see the projects actually working as well. So there's another member of our Preston jam that some of you may have met if you've turned up to the physical jams, but and he's called Chris, and Chris is a little bit shy and nervous about coming along to, well, he says, look, I'm looking forward to the physical jams. I'm not really into the virtual jams so much. But I was lucky a week or so ago to go and visit Chris in his house, and you might be able to see an image on the screen at the moment, a photograph. And Chris has got projects, and he has a maker space in his own house. It's Chris Dell that I'm talking about. So if you've ever been to the Preston Jams, you will have met Chris. And I just wanted to show you this just for a moment. So I said to Chris, come along and show people at our jam. They'd love to see this. And Chris was, well, you can take some photos and you can show people, just don't put me in the photo, you know. So if you walk into a house, you go in through the front door and then you walk along the hallway. In some people's houses, you might go into the kitchen, or adjoined to the kitchen is a dining space. And in Chris's dining room, this is what you see on the wall. Now, I should have put something like there, like a banana for scale, but instead over here, we have a Raspberry Pi, which we can use as a reference. So and as we were talking, so I didn't record a video. As we were talking, this display kept changing, and some of it was video, some of it was still images, and it was absolutely glorious. And Chris was saying something, oh, well, I'm glad you like it. This was actually something that was being thrown away. I said, somebody was throwing this away. He says, well, yeah, it didn't work properly. The case had been broken. There was no stand for it. And, you know, whoever owned it previously just decided it just wasn't worth keeping anymore. And Chris rescued it from the skip. And the first thing he did was to strip the case apart. And he noticed there was a display driver inside, which needed a little bit of care and attention. And he managed to buy one of these little cables here. He was telling me that these are quite a good thing to use rather than a standard HDMI cable. And he has a wire that I think either acts as an aerial, that could be the power supply. I do have some more photos. You can see there's a person standing in there. It gives it a little bit of an element of scale. Don't have that many more photos of it, but it was absolutely incredible. And you know, some people will have a painting or a photograph on their wall, but somebody's just sent me a message saying you can't actually see these photos, and I thought I was sharing them. Oh, I'm sharing them in the live stream, I think. So so somebody's saying they can see my desktop. All right, okay. That's a shame. You can't see these photos. I must have clicked on the wrong thing. Let me stop the share for a moment and I'll just try that once again. Okay, let's try it again. Yeah, me going babble, 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 and you couldn't see the thing that I was sharing. So let's go back. So I'm not going to repeat all of the words again, but so this is the thing I was talking about so excitedly. So it's a very large screen. From memory, I would say it's probably 40 inches or so across. I mean, more than a meter, I would say, although there is a Raspberry Pi there, which suggests it's probably not quite that big. And I showed some other photos that you couldn't see because I didn't have the screen share on. So this is the panel that was originally dangling or hanging out the back. He's had to do some repairs with tape around the side to tidy it up because the case had somehow got damaged. And that's the Raspberry Pi. And Chris, if I go back to this, that's actually how it would appear in the house. So if you had malicious intent and you decided you want to damage it or cut through the wires, well, you could do, because it's not all neatly tied away. But he said the Raspberry Pi was lying around, and a lot of people have got excessive amounts of Raspberry Pi that they're not using. So I just thought it was a really nice project, and it has helped inspire the theme for next month. Now, if you subscribe to our Eventbrite account, so some of you do, it means every time we publish an event, you get a notification telling you that the event has gone live. So already some people have booked tickets for next month's jam. So our next jam is on Monday, the 1st of November. And if you think back to when we first started this evening, I asked you, I said, do you have any projects that you might refer to as dead tech? In fact, let me see if I can get the screen share to work properly this time. So share screen and choose the correct browser. And I think you'll be able to see there. So on the 1st of November, it's the first Monday of November, we're having another one of these. And we're asking, what have you done with your dusty, dilapidated, donated, damaged, dated? So they all begin with D, dead tech, or decommissioned technology to avoid disposing of it. So the example I showed you of Chris's interactive display, that it's different from Lorraine's staircase, but it is still an interesting project. So we're asking you, I mean, some of you have never presented at our jams before, and I think we might have Lee Varga joining us next month, because he was telling me earlier in the chat that he has managed to repair some old technology. So if you consider yourself as a bit of a digital Dr. Frankenstein, as in you're able to breathe new life into old tech, then please just come and join us. Maybe share a photo or something like that. And we're looking for some lightning talks next month. And we'll have a special guest interview if you've got any suggestions as to who you think would be a good person. We have a repair cafe here in Preston. You may have a repair cafe near where you live, where once a month or so people come together to bring together old appliances that some can be repaired easily and some cannot. Right. We have finished a little bit earlier than we normally do, and some of you might think that's a good thing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the live stream on YouTube, and I'm going to type a URL in. So it's http://exa.is/rjamjar. And that is the URL that will take you to the Zoom. And in a few moments, once people start to come in, there are breakout rooms, and you can decide which breakout room to go in. And sometimes people hang around for a few minutes. Sometimes people hang around for an hour or so. And then I will stop the recording. So I am actually going to stop the recording. So I'll say thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I'll see you in a few moments if you join us in the jam jar. So